In this lesson, we're going to learn about adjusting exposure. So I've brought open this long exposure night shot, which I think will be a fun, creative one to play around with. In most editing applications, there will be multiple ways to adjust the exposure of an image, sometimes with sliders, sometimes with a curve tool, sometimes with what's called levels. With Lightroom, the easiest way is under these basic adjustments with this group of adjustments for tone. You've got exposure, contrast, and then you have these other sliders down here which adjust individual parts of an image. So let's go through them so I can show you what's actually happening. Exposure, now you know, or you should know if you've taken this class, is the overall brightness of your image. So by dragging to the right, you're going to make all areas of the image brighter. Dragging to the left will make all images darker. So everything from the darks to the highlights. And I love Lightroom because there's this great histogram at the top that you can see. Remember when we learned about histograms? On the left, you have the blacks going into the shadows, into the mids. Over on the right, you have your highlights and then pure whites. So your blacks are your pure darks, your whites are your pure whites, and those are overexposure and underexposure. And sometimes it's okay if you have some of that. Here we have a little bit of complete white overexposure. That's where the headlights of this light were. So if we adjust the entire exposure, everything moves to the left or to the right. Double clicking to reset that. I'm going to skip contrast for now. With highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, we can adjust individual parts of our image. So if we just want to adjust the highlights, so this area up here, we can use this slider to bring down. And you can see in our image that it's bringing down and bringing back some of the information of the road down below our light streak. If we want to adjust the shadow, maybe bring up some of the shadows so that we get more information in these trees, then we can bring that up. Blacks are the darker parts, even darker than the shadows, and whites are the pure whites, brighter than the highlights. And that might be some of these stars, and you can bring those up or bring those down. Contrast is something we've probably covered in this class before too, but basically what that is the ratio between the darks and the brights. So a very contrasty image will have very dark darks and very bright brights. So if I increase the contrast slider, you can see, and looking at the histogram is a good option, you can see that the darks and the darks kind of spread out. Whereas if we drag this to the left, everything comes into the middle, becoming less contrasty. Everything is more along the mid-range of exposure. So that's what contrast is. And generally, when you're editing raw photos that come in sort of flat and not contrasty, you want to add contrast. We've already done that, though, a little bit by bringing down the blacks and bringing up the whites. We added contrast. If we want to make it even more crazy, we'd actually bring down the shadows and bring up the highlights. This is super duper extremely crazy contrasty. And you can see here in the histogram, it's all blacks and all whites basically. So let's go back to resetting everything. And with this image, what would we actually want to do? Well, I think basically what we did. We want to bring down the highlights so we get more of that information down under the street. I don't necessarily need to bring up the shadows. I might actually bring down the shadows a little bit, make the sky a little bit more punchy. The blacks I might bring down a little bit as well. The whites I might bring down a little bit as well. So I'm actually bringing everything down quite a bit. When I do that, maybe I'll bring up the shadows just a little bit. So that's looking like a better exposure for the style I'm going for this photo. Now, let me bring in this photo right here, which was one of our examples. Not the greatest portrait in terms of composition because we got this big, bright background that's super distracting. This line going through Will's head, it's not that good of a composition or framing. But with editing, we can fix some of these things, make it a little less intense. So this is a highlight up here. So what would we adjust? Either the highlights or the whites. You got to sort of play around. Some of it might be the highlights. And if I drag this to the left, you can see I get some of that information back. Now let's try the whites. And yeah, dragging the whites all the way down does help. You get some of that brown of the ground and it's not completely pure white. Now our histogram is relatively better, a big hill in the middle, rather than having things over on the right-hand side. So that's pretty good. And you can see that, watch the histogram, watch in the top right. As I drag this to the right, see the triangle in the top right go from yellow to red to white? When it says red, it's like warning you, like, hey, you're about to get too overexposed part of your image. If it's in the white, it just means that there's a lot that's already overexposed. So generally, you don't necessarily want it hitting the white, maybe part of the red. But for this image, we want that part to be exposed a little bit more properly. And so that's why I would bring down the whites there. So that's how you adjust the exposure in Lightroom Classic CC. We're going to continue with the next lessons on some of the other adjustments like color and saturation. At the end of this section, or after the saving and export lesson, we're going to walk through some complete edits, and I'll show you more of what I would actually do while I edit an entire photo, which might be good. These lessons are more for you to just learn, here's how you do it, and then later on we'll put it into practice in one whole demonstration.